Hi everyone, welcome to Data and AI Readiness Reboot. We are here today to execute a first virtual roundtable together with 4 experts practitioners in the area of data analytics and AI. And for this first episode of their reboot, we are starting with a topic that everybody right now is concerned about or discussing at least, and it's the corona effect. But we want to look at this from a completely other angle. We are going to be looking at evolution through crisis, impact of the outbreak on data and AI digitalization. And today with us, we have Anders Aprteg, who is head of research at Peltarion and a steering member of the AI innovation in AI innovation of Sweden. Hi, Anders.
Hello, Goran.
Hi, nice to have you here with us today.
Yeah.
We have Henrik Göthberg, founder of Dairdux. Henrik, are you with us?
Hi, Goran. I'm here, and hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you super good. Happy to have you with us as well. We have Patrick Coach, business developer, AI and IoT at IBM. Hi, Patrick.
Hello, Goran. Hello, guys. Nice to be on.
Perfect. Happy to have you with us as well. And last and not the least, we have Diego Galar, professor at Luleå University of Technology, with us as well. Hi, Diego.
Hello, Goran. Pleased to be here.
Perfect. Diego is actually in Spain at this point of time. So we have 4 at Sweden and 1 in Spain. So that is cool. Good. So to start with, why this virtual roundtable? All 4 of us, with this in a discussion, we came across that the topic of corona outbreak is almost like a black swan, something that we have discussed in the past conferences of Hyperight, data innovation, and all of the rest of them, but in a number of other events as well. But we never actually went to the bottom of it. So the first question actually, and how to start this discussion, I would like to address the question to Diego, who is an expert in this area. Can we define corona outbreak as a black swan? And how can we define first what is a black swan?
Yeah, thank you, Goran. Actually, if you let me share 2 slides, then to warm up and to see if corona is a black swan, we are going to see actually what are the properties of a black swan. I'm not sure if you can see my screen. Hopefully, yes. Okay, then yes, let me to warm up the discussion. Define what is a black swan in the common language, and why we can talk about coronavirus as a black swan. Let me say first that a black swan, as you know, Goran, and as you may have heard me in many speeches in the data innovation summits for many years, is a black swan is something that many people don't like to talk about. It's because it's difficult to assess the risk of a black swan. But a black swan, what is a black swan? In few words, a black swan is one event that is rare, is something that is very, very rare. That's why the probability of occurrence is so low that many times you cannot evaluate this probability. The impact of the black swan of this event is extreme, and the retrospective, not prospective, retrospective predictability is there. What does it mean? That when the black swan happens, suddenly we say, oh, we could have predicted this black swan because we had all the ingredients, all the data to predict that, but suddenly we miss it. In few words, a black swan is something that happens very rarely, extreme impact, and when we look back, suddenly we find that we could have predicted the black swan. What is the ugly truth of the black swans? Many people think that the history is dominated by the black swans. It's the impact of the black swans in the technology, in the economy, are much more strong than other events that we are able to predict. Probability is difficult to predict. And let me be honest, in the data science that we will talk later, in the data science and in the probabilistic world, we neglect the importance of these black swans. Definitely, answering your question, Goran, for me is certainly coronavirus is a black swan.
So given the fact, given the SARS and MARS before that happened, we could definitely predict the output of such a virus outbreak, but still we neglected the signs earlier, right? Is that one of the parts?
Yeah, this is the problem, the problem with the black swans along the history. Like, for example, we were mentioning the Spanish flu in the beginning of the 20th century. When these events pass, or for example, Chernobyl or Fukushima, etc., when this event pass and when we look back, we realize that we had the tools to predict that, but we didn't. And this is exactly the definition of a black swan. Suddenly, when it pops, we never know what is happening. We are not prepared for that. And of course, the impact is huge. But after some time, we realize that with the tools we had, we were able to predict it. And this is the most disappointing part of the black swans, when you realize that you could have predicted the black swan.
Thank you for that.
Actually, let me, Goran, answer to finish my reasoning about the black swan, and then my colleagues can continue. Let me say that the black swan, what is when pop-ups, what is unfortunately showing is that we don't have artificial intelligence in our companies. What we have is automated process with the mindsets constrained by our way of thinking. In few words, we don't have artificial intelligence to show what we can, to see what we cannot see. What we have is automated process that they can do our processes much faster, but they cannot see beyond what we can see. In few words, we have good degree of automation with machine learning, in my opinion. We have accelerated many processes in the industry, but unfortunately, the artificial intelligence to overcome human capabilities, in my opinion, is not there. The models are still constrained by our limitations.
Yeah, so Patrick, let me jump in here, Diego, and just comment on that, because I think you are absolutely right that the constraints in the benefit or the efficiency or the effect of technology is certainly a human limitation at this point. But I'm just curious to hear your view on, did you see the Bill Gates thing that circulated about a 2015 TED talk that he gave, when he said, well, the next big thing that's going to happen is not war, it is some sort of pandemic. So he just looked at the social readiness and the fact that these pandemics historically pop up every now and then, and he just draw that conclusion. It wasn't very sophisticated data analysis behind it, but it was just like common sense. You look at the healthcare capacity, you look at the people, you look at the exposure, you look at previous viruses, you look at global interaction patterns, and you just draw the obvious conclusion that something's going to happen at some point. But more concretely, there was that Canadian company, the AI startup Blue Dot, that predicted what was happening in China as early as in December, because they were monitoring a vast set of different data sets, and they were basically saying in December, look at this thing happening in Wuhan, it's gonna just explode, and then nobody really acted upon it. But in retrospect, we are certainly doing what you say that we do with black swans. We sort of rationalize it and we say, aha, we could have done something there. We could have not taken away resources from healthcare. We could have not ignored, the data-driven conclusions of this little Canadian AI startup. We could have done something. And I think to answer then your question, Goran, what's happening now? I think there's a lot of learning happening very quickly and very acceleratedly.
I see a couple of different angles on what we're talking about now. I saw this conversation with Bill Gates. There was actually a longer interview with him not so long ago, and he got the question around, do you feel, how do you feel about that you predicted it? He wasn't trying to brag anything about that, But then he sort of got the question, which I think is quite interesting. We even saw something starting to happen from December up to January, February, and then we can almost talk about the lost month. So here data is out there, the facts are there, but are we truly ready to be data-driven or rely on data rather than opinions and the hippo, as we talk about? Like, could we, in reality, that was the question that Bill Gates completely ignored, that he didn't want to answer, because he would have said, you know, I put it out there, the expert put it out there, but the hippos, I can't remember what the hippos is all about, but it's what do you say? Hippo is the short for when we take decisions based on rank, or how, what is it?
Hierarchy and
yeah.
authority.
Anders, what's the hippo? You know what I'm talking about. Have you heard that before?
Yeah, but I don't want to promote that kind of discussion. But just to continue the discussion about Bill Gates, he had said so many interesting things, and one thing he said recently is, how we are, panicking to try to handle all the effects of Corona in all dimensions of our societies. And it potentially is causing a delay in handling other societal challenges such as climate change and circular economy and whatnot. But he still thinks this will be positive for these other challenges as well, since the pandemic have actually caused us all globally to collaborate much more and basically hyper-transform to start to solve a common problem. And what we've learned from doing this together in such an extremely hyper fast way could be really useful to also handle other societal challenges, such as climate change, sustainable society, and circular economy. So I certainly agree with that. And I do hope that he's right in that the learnings that we can get from the effects of Corona will pan out also beyond Corona and allow us to be more data-driven, but also handle transformation and adapt in a more collaborative and global way.
I'm curious. We are all working in different projects and stuff like that. Without going into any specifics, but how have your projects changed, or how have the focus in the projects changed? I can start from my side, where we are working on several facets, and it's quite clear that we go into Corona times, and we need to focus on the business critical topics, and some parts of the areas in data and AI and digitalization, we're basically saying, let's put this on hold, right or wrong. But essentially, all of a sudden it means let's put all the efforts over here. So one very interesting topic has been, if you're in a little bit bigger enterprises, and that all of a sudden, like the project silos or the project, you really focus attention where it counts. So this is one key experience I have done, and even where I'm currently right now changing outlook. That instead of working from my program, I'm actually right now being dropped into another program, doing the same work, but actually working holistically. And I see the benefit that actually we are now faster coming to the same common, stable way of looking at things. For instance, architecture, strategic directions and stuff. So I'm seeing stuff being focused. That is one key thing I see. What about you guys? Any other? What do you take out of your initiatives?
I think Henrik, in answering your question, with this event, unfortunate event, the priorities, the ranking of priorities changed dramatically. This is true for the persons and for the companies, and this is something that we have to consider. That they're coming back to the Spanish flu 1 century ago. In the video you were mentioning by Bill Gates, he was showing how the Spanish flu, with the mobility that we have today, the Spanish flu would be spread all over the world. Then actually we have a globalization now that is positive and negative for this. But the priorities have changed to some extent, Henrik, that, for example, as you said, in the companies, I can say some good examples, like, for example, the factory of Seat here in Spain, in Barcelona, that, of course, they have stopped the production because they don't have spare parts, but they are producing respirators and they are doing certain things because it's common sense that, of course, is at least we can contribute to this to some extent. And of course, they are losing money, but it's even for companies that are really profit oriented. It's not time to talk about money. It's they are putting some efforts to improve the situation of the country, in this case Spain, that is quite dramatic, and we will talk about money later on. This is important. For the people, the priorities are also different. Now people pay attention to things that they didn't pay attention. And as you say, it's in terms of business, it's also very interesting how we are filtering out the things that were not essential. Even we are doing business and we are doing works without many things that maybe were totally superfluous in the past. And this is something that, of course, for me, makes the human being one animal that is very easy to be adapted to crisis times. We are extremely flexible, and we get adapted in no time to this crisis. We are talking about something that 1 month ago we were having normal lives, and suddenly in a month we are talking from home, with the supermarkets almost with some kind of shortage of some stuff, and we are still working and trying to get the best benefits for our countries, industries, and families. Then, for me, the adaptability of our nature is extremely important, and this makes our ranking of priorities, as you say, Henrik, extremely dynamic, and this is extremely positive. However, talking about AI and data, let me be honest, I see that our models, our AI models that we are working in general for everything have failed. We don't have our models prepared for the unknown things. And this is something that we have to make our models robust and resilient. And so far, this crisis is showing that the AI we have is neither robust, neither resilient, and also very fragile.
Anders, what would you say on this?
No, but it's certainly true that a lot of the AI implementations that exist today is not operational enough. So it's hard to count in the ROI or the value for it. But that said, the potential for AI application is extreme. And what people sometimes focus on is perhaps a bit narrow, thinking about, how can we, from an epidemiological point of view, try to track the spread, or how can we, from a medical point of view, try to detect the actually having the virus or the outcome for a patient having it. But there are so many other dimensions that corona affects our society. And there was this interesting podcast by Lex Friedman recently where he tried to show the 7 different dimensions how the corona is affecting our society. And one was, of course, the biological and medical aspect, being able to do drug discovery or drug repurposing, or trying to improve testing of corona and so forth. But that's just one aspect. There are so many other things. Trying, for example, to understand the psychological dimensions, how this affects humans individually, the concern and the anxiety that it's causing people, and how we can use AI to try to at least help out with that. And then we have more like social aspects, how the society in general is causing a lot of misinformation and information being spread that cannot really be trusted, causing a panic in our society in various ways. And there are a lot of things that AI can do to help out with that as well. And then we, of course, have other things like the economy as well that have potentially the hugest impact on our society. And being able to have more sustainable, perhaps circular business models and rethink how we can handle situations like this is, of course, super interesting, and also an area where AI can help a lot. And a number of other dimensions, like political, how a lot of politicians is abusing the situation to gain some political advantage and propaganda by taking advantage of the corona instead of really trying to collaborate and work together to fight the corona crisis. And some other dimensions like existential and philosophical and so forth. But this really shows, I think, the large impact that corona has on a society from not only a medical point of view, but from so many more dimensions. And thinking in this way, of course, AI is not the only solution, and a lot of solutions we have is very immature. But we have seen a significant progress in AI in just recent years, especially like NLP and text, that allows us to do things that never was possible before. And I think this allows us to hyper-transform our society to take advantage of this. And we should really look forward to do that and let this situation be a way to have hyper innovation in our society. That, I think, would be a super positive outcome.
Perfect. Just to bring some kind of a balance to the discussion again, just as a summary, so we can continue after. So we started basically with black swan. What is it and why we cannot predict it, right? And then Diego mentioned that we are so awesome in monitoring things, but we are not good in turning data into. So we are good in turning data into insight, but not the insight into action. Right? Which is a very good of the maturity of the data and AI readiness at this point of time. We are talking about AI, machine learning, predictive analytics, but it seems like that is right now not exactly where we are. We are actually right now in exploration phase of that, but we are extremely good in the traditional BI, maybe a little bit of advanced analytics, right? Should we take some kind of would you agree in general? In implementing this in an organizational enterprise point of view, right? Because if we are talking about pure AI and good predictive, prescriptive models, where are they?
Yeah.
Right,
Can I add, Goran, one point that is related to Data Innovation Summit, and it's one thing that I learned in Data Innovation Summit, and I'm really grateful for that. Is I remember the presentation in Data Innovation Summit, the digital butterfly effect. That is. And the digital butterfly effect, for me, I don't remember now the name of their.
Amer Muhammad from Stenaline.
Yeah, this is for me. This is a perfect thing to explain what we are expecting now with Corona situation from AI. This speaker mentioned that the digital butterfly effect is to find the invisible things through the AI in the data. It's the data should help me to find things that I cannot see, the invisible things for me. And this is the digital butterfly effect, that how some small events propagates all over the world. And this is something that in the data, in this kind of ocean of data, in these big data lakes, I cannot see everything with machine learning. But maybe AI, as Anders said, is a promise to find the invisible things for us and see this small butterfly effect that can cause a disaster if propagates all over the world. Then for me, the digital butterfly effect is excellent example talking about AI to analyze the corona effect.
Right, and another comment to that.
Reason for the challenge that we have with AI. So if we take the medical domain, we have a lot of medical doctors that have a lot of domain expertise exactly about how to, for example, detect corona and perform tests for that. The problem is that they don't have the AI expertise to use AI for it. So we need to have another person, another human, to do the AI expertise part. And they don't have the medical part. So there is this kind of catch-22 problem. If we instead had better tooling, better, more mature tools to actually use AI to enable the domain experts themselves to start to perform AI experimentation, that could actually lead that we have a direct use and proper take advantage of the domain expertise that, for example, medical doctors have. This is a big challenge of today. And that's the challenge is basically that the tooling is too immature, and with better tooling, making it easier to use AI and allowing domain expertise to directly experiment themselves, that could be a significant improvement and scale up of benefits for AI.
Absolutely, I totally agree. But also, I'd like to return to something that you said earlier, Anders, about the need for, or you implied that there's a need for a global mindset to think about this. And I think that is very true. And I think what is dawning on everybody, for everybody now, is the fact that we do live in a global society. We've been living in a global society for a long time, but now that we digitized it or digitalized it, it has become very apparent that it is very vulnerable. But we have been thinking about vulnerability in terms of digital terms. So there's been a lot of talk about cybersecurity, right? And firming up the digital infrastructure and putting that in place. And we've sort of neglected a little bit the biological implications of a global society. And I think what is happening now, or what can happen now, is that we can address this in a much more sophisticated way than we've done before. And there was that article in Financial Times by Yuval Harari where he spoke about global solidarity instead of nationalistic isolation. And I think we can't, even though different countries are trying out different ways to dealing with it, and all situations are different, there is certainly a need for that global joining of forces. But I do think also that we are seeing the beginnings of this. So I saw this great thing about data against COVID, which is that initiative where people are actually coming together across the disciplines to put data science in the hands of medical expertise and cross-pollinate the various ways of working around AI and medical data or expertise. But also, I think there was this great data set that the Allen Institute put out, right? The Cord, what's it called? The Cord 19, which is another example of how we are actually thinking outside of the silos, trying to figure out what's the best way to just leave aside petty differences in the face of large challenges. So I think there is that beginning of a realization that we're all in this together. Nobody's going to be able to solve it on their own. Individual strategies are fruitless. The resilience has to be a collaborative one, and we have to sort of tackle it together. And I think the beginning of that, I think we're seeing both sort of on a global scale, but also as Henrik pointed out earlier, what are the nice to have projects, which are the essential ones, and let's just focus in on the essentials. So I think it's a real sort of testifier what's happening now in terms of where do we need to allocate resources and how do we make sure that we pool enough of them.
I certainly agree, Patrick, and I certainly hope that, the old saying, nothing unites like a common enemy, and we certainly have Corona in common. And I think that this could really be a way to start collaborating in a much more global and solidaric way. We've been working a lot with, for example, the Swedish AI agenda, trying to accelerate AI adoption in Sweden and the same in Europe. And one thing that is kind of scary when you look at all the nations' different AI strategies is that everyone wants to be the leading nations. And all they want to have their own approach for how to solve that. Instead of trying to find, how can we collaborate to really have a common collaborative approach to start to make use of AI in the best way for our society. Perhaps Corona is actually one cause of us changing that and starting to be much more collaborative. I certainly hope that's the case.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Henrik.
No, finish this line of thought off, because I think what we are talking about now is so strong and so important, but it's actually an opportunity now to take this down from macro level, global society level, to the microcosmos of our own companies, because something is really happening right now. We talk about that we are in some sort of hyper transformation needing to happen in order to deal with our situation. And first, you take your topic you wanted to finalize on the macro level, and then I would like to explore more on the micro level, more concrete levels, what is actually happening at home in our companies, which are really, really good if we can turn the positives out of this. But before I leave this macro level, if you had some more to say there.
Well, I guess not really, but I do think it is interesting to look at what is happening now when people are forced to realize the situation we're actually living in, like the reality of the world that we live in. There are certain things that you can sort of only deny up until a certain point, and then eventually you just go, oh, okay, it is what it is. And when that dawns on you, I think that's a great invitation for change, and then you can sort of realign and readjust. And you know that quote attributed to Jeff Bezos of Amazon, your margin, my opportunity, which is basically a way of saying, if there is slack in the system, I can tighten it and I can take you out. And I think there's a lot of slack in our system now. There are a lot of things that have been sub-optimized. And I think it was Lex Friedman who spoke about, the local optimization having been the priority over the global or the larger optimization. And I think now we're in a situation where we can actually address things out of a global or very large optimization approach. And this is because we're talking about the digital nature of a lot of the challenges or possibilities that we have. So there is so much data out there now that we can actually be data-driven, and we can deal with very large complexities if we bring in AI. But then, as Diego said earlier, we certainly need to be sophisticated about how we do this. But I think the opportunity is here now, and we can seize it. And I think we're seeing the start of this.
But if I may, if I can mention just one comment to complete what you mentioned, is you say they're absolutely right that now there are initiatives of AI together with medicine in order to work and find solutions for Corona out there. And for me, this is a good example that you may have heard me in the conference when we talk about hybrid approaches for the AI problems. What do I mean? The AI, the data scientists must work with the domain knowledge people. If these domain knowledge people are the doctors in medicine, or are the doctors or the people in the factories in my domain that I work with condition monitoring of the machines, the data scientists together with the domain experts must co-create the solution. And together, because if we expect, as Anders said, that the AI is going to solve our problems, but we are not feeding AI with the domain knowledge in the proper way, AI will never solve anything. We have to co-create the solution with AI as a cross-discipline, working with the different domain knowledge and not separated by silos. Then when we understand that domain knowledge and AI must be merged, co-creating the solution, then we will be able to move forward. And as you said, Padre, I think this is changing the mindset, and we are going to be new guys with a new mindset after this crisis.
And now this is what I want to jump into the operational level now, because we are in our current society. We are at the peak of the industrial society. If we are following that traditional S curve, and we are now moving into a data and AI-driven society, whether we like it or not, that's the evolution. Now, what we have been living with is management and steering to reach efficiencies And to some degree, we have been applauded by our tayloristic approach, a separation of tasks, doing things that how you create efficiencies in a very stable industry, in a very stable process. And all of a sudden now, when we as a society and large organizations, as an example, are now trying to move into the data first society or AI first society, our steering, our siloed approaches are not really equipped for this cross-functional approach.
Right.
What happens now all of a sudden when you have this extreme pressure, extreme crisis? We need to help each other out. We need to work beyond the silos, beyond the processes. All of a sudden, what I see is basically, okay, let's just get the job done. And all of a sudden, this crisis is helping us to create, the Amazon garage startup approach. So it's like, no, don't forget, even Amazon started in a garage. They started working together, all hands on deck, doing the work together. And I think for me, the biggest challenge is the one main challenge that Anders is highlighting, that the traditional company with the domain expertise don't have the data and AI expertise, and the traditional company with IT supply or IT organization in one part, and now and the business part somewhere else, and now the mathematicians, where do they fit in? It's a fundamental organizational orchestration problem. That is not the problem for the small startup, but it's a real problem in society. And I can see this is what I think is very exciting now. Two things. All of a sudden, we basically need to fix something because someone needs a new report to understand if their business is going to tank. Very simple. All of a sudden now, the main guy from domain expertise with the guy with the report, with the guy with the data, they need to drop everything and you solve the problem. And all of a sudden, it just works, and it goes actually very, very fast. So yeah. It's a little bit like, how can we now harness this?
Why is that?
Because we are not working. Because if we are following the problem of making data AI value, the core fundamental topic is intersectional innovation, domain expertise together with AI expertise, and to some degree, technologies slowly getting there by simplifying the tools so more normal business people can use AI. In the meantime, that needs to happen by people working together as teams. So to become data and AI ready before the technologies are simple enough to be abundant, this way of working needs to happen. And now the problem is, if we don't truly understand this core fundamental problem, we don't really understand why we need to reorganize our whole companies or why our steering needs to look different. With a crisis, what happens now, the normal KPI, the normal mandate, who is boss of who, and what process you should follow to get the data pipeline guy next to the data scientist guy and get the technology right, and then work with the right domain. That just goes away because you are focusing on the real business problem and you put all hands on deck. But it's actually showing you a little bit about, how should our steering look like right now? How should our mandates look like right now? How should we think about teams and projects in this new world? And which is maybe...
But Henrik, let me interrupt you, because as you mentioned that AI and domain knowledge, and I would like to say one positive thing for AI is AI. We have, in my case, I'm between both worlds and struggle with this, but AI is trying to approach to the domain knowledge in many cases. I think the efforts that we have made, even with explainable AI in the last years, trying to make the AI more explainable for other people, not that black box models that are ununderstandable for everybody, trying to be closer and closer to domain knowledge, like medicine, like engineering. But of course, doctors in medicine, for example, they have to accept AI as a tool. Yes. For example, they work with their statistical models, as we have seen the models of Imperial College predicting the virus spreading, etc. They have to trust on the AI, same as they trust on certain statistical models. And for that, these kind of goals, they have to merge.
I totally agree, and I think you're absolutely right, Diego, about the need for trust. And if you don't have trust, you won't have scale, and you won't be able to be data-driven because you won't dare to be. And I think, to Henrik's point earlier, I think what we are seeing now is we're seeing that there is a need to be data-driven, right? Because the processes, the organizational structures, the hierarchies, all of these things that have been put in place, especially in larger companies, but also in society at large, has been because there has been that has been the best thing to do, right? So far, I mean, it has made sense. But now I think when we can become more data-driven, when there is more data out there and there are more technology out there to harness insights from that data, we could actually embrace something that Terence McKenna said. I mean, he said a lot of great things, but he said, to the extent that we are responsible people, we will have anarchy. And he basically was implying anarchy only works if you're responsible, because if you're responsible, you will do the right thing, disregarding your position in the firm, disregarding the political climate, disregarding everything. You just get the job done. And I think the crisis now is just showing that. It's just, okay, I don't care. If you have a good idea, if you have an idea that you think can help the situation, let's try that out. And we're seeing these different initiatives, right? The call for code, the hack the crisis, all of these things is about just having people come together, do what is needed to help the situation, not think too much about which company do you belong to, what's your role. It's just about pooling resources and being close to data and see what can come out of it. I think there was a great post on LinkedIn earlier where I think it was, and this may be completely wrong, so we have to fact check this, but as I read it, it was the Absolute vodka factory creating ethanol that was being shipped to healthcare facilities, and it was a Scania truck rolling out of the factory, but it was a Volvo person commenting on the benefit of that approach and explicitly acknowledging, it's not a Volvo truck, but it's just an awesome thing to do. And I think we're seeing more and more of that. And I think this can be a great takeaway, right? If you're a startup and you want to do something, you want to change the world, you just go into the garage, sit down and work together. And then as you grow, you sort of forget that. And then you sort of put structures in place. And how Spotify evolved, and they tried these different organizational ways of structuring, but they ended up anyway in this big monolithic big company structure anyhow, right? So I think if we can invite people to work with data to create trust, adoption will come, and that moving away from agendas other than what the data tells us will be possible. So I'm quite hopeful in terms of what I think the crisis can push through. And I think that this notion of evolution through crisis is a very appealing one. It's never fun to be in a crisis, but once you're out of it, you can actually integrate and learn from it, and then you are in a better position. And I think that's what we're seeing now also, Henrik, on the micro level, right?
Yes.
Specific projects and a specific work situation, and people are just teaming up and doing a very good job.
Yeah, so I think the reflection is to be, I urge everyone to be very reflective what is happening around them now, because all of a sudden you're stumbling upon things, what actually works and what doesn't work. And I think yes, anarchy, and that we could be more like a startup, but it's hard to be a global startup with 100,000 employees. So but how to take a little bit about that and trying to learn from that to maybe figure some stuff out. I think it's in the public sector and in the large organizations, it's typical that you have ways, things have worked in the past that is really in some ways almost going the wrong, hindering. That is really hard to see if you're not in the middle of it. And I think take this reflection and see what that comes out of.
So necessity is the mother of all inventions.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, necessity is the mother of all invention. That's true. That's true. And I think humans are good at the scramble, right? When there is a real problem, people tend to just drop everything and team up and get the work done. And now we're seeing this on a global scale, and we are certainly under pressure for sure. But I think good things can come out of it, and I'm hopeful.
Yeah, I think so too. And especially the movement where AI moves closer to the domain experts is a really good movement. We usually call it like the decentralized AI
model. Yeah.
And that can be really beneficial, that can scale up the proper and beneficial use of AI. And just to add one more point, we can easily see some examples where AI is extremely useful today, and that is the big tech giants, the Amazons, the Googles, the Facebooks of the world, and Microsoft, and the Chinese companies, the Alibaba and Tencent, Baidu, etc. They know how to make use of AI. They have the data, they have the research groups, they have the infrastructure, and they make huge profits by using AI in this way. But unfortunately, most other companies don't know how to do this. But they know it's possible. You can see it in these tech giants.
Yeah, and
so
I think
the question now is really, how do we hyper transform the other companies to move in this direction? And Corona could potentially be one cause for us doing this hyper transformation that hopefully can be really beneficial, so we don't have an increased AI divide where the client is just running away.
This is my mission, Anders, that you're now getting goosebumps when you talk about the AI divide, because I've been gravitating to the companies that is not, there are people who knows more about data and AI than I do in many different ways. But what I have tried to understand in all my career, at least the last 10 years, is how do we, if you're coming from a physical asset world, if you're coming from an engineering or a domain world, how do you close this divide? And for me, this is actually this is a crisis on a larger scale in society, because we will have a different types of who's gots and who has nots in the world that will be extreme, and it's already extreme. But we are coming to the countries, right? Continents.
Right.
So I think this topic, how do we learn now, and how do we hyper transform society that are not part of this, very, very elite club? That is a huge opportunity and topic actually to solve the climate crisis, to work with the fundamentals of poverty, fundamentals around intelligent water. All these topics is actually not about the health. It's about the normal people, the normal companies embracing and getting them on board. I mean, like, that's my. So to me, the main topic here, that's where this data AI ready come about. So yes, we need to think about innovation. We need to think about the startups. Someone needs to drive that train, and the train you are going on with Peltarion to simplify AI, to bring it to the masses. Then you're doing your job to bring it to cut the divide from the tech end. But the rest of the world needs to slowly start re-understanding their own. They need to re-understand themselves. I'm a domain expert as a doctor. What does it mean for me to be a doctor in a core operating model or core business model or core process, which is now 50% AI, 50% human?
Right.
That is
the
the human part that needs to grow.
You gave me goosebumps, Henrik.
Yeah, I love it. This is great, and I think you're absolutely right. It has to do with self-definition. So
Yes.
a lot of companies that suffer are companies that aren't able to redefine their self-image. You have Kodak and all these classic examples, right?
Yeah.
They just cannot do it. Whereas you have other companies such as Volvo or companies that are no longer, necessarily what they were, but they have an idea of electromobility or car as a service, or they're just continuously exploring. And the tech giants, or the data giants, I should say, have been extremely good at this, because they have adopted this idea of, hey, what's our business? Our business is making business out of data, right? So then perhaps you're selling books, and then you're not a booker. You're not a bookshop. You're a data company. So then you just move into the other thing, and then the other thing, and the other thing, and you just continuously move into the area where it's most profitable for you to work. And I think there's a great learning in that on the personal level as well, because as you say, traditionally, doctors have been these, 10 years in school, learning all the Latin names. They have all been super knowledge oriented. Now, today, but when they have, if I may go on a rant here, what they have lost is the human element of caregiving. So there are many examples of doctors that are super knowledgeable, but just terrible, compassionate people. They just are these non-empathic, knowledgeable experts. But what I think we're seeing now was something that Jack Ma called out at Davos a couple of years ago, when he said, let the machines do what they're good at, and let us humans figure out what we are good at. And if we combine those two, we can have a great impact. And what the doctors need to be in the future are predominantly good care people that can deliver good care, good medicine, and consolidation in a tough situation, and then let the data figure out what is that gray blip on the scan actually, what's that about, and then team up. And I think the doctors then need to define themselves. So I think companies need to redefine, people need to redefine, societies need to redefine, and I think there are many institutions or boundaries that won't be able to last. Like the idea of the nation state, it's going to fall. It's not going to be around for very long.
But let me, Patrick, can I make a point just to Patrick comment? Because for me, what is very interesting, what you said, Patrick, regarding the confidence in the system. It's essential that the systems provide confidence and trust to the users. And we have to remember, and our memory many times is very short. 10 years ago or 15 years ago, with the first SARS virus, we thought that this virus was going to be terrible for all over the world, and especially for Europe. And many European countries, and I talk especially from Spain and Sweden, they bought millions of vaccines for the SARS, for their first SARS, and nothing happened. Then, what happened afterwards? Many people criticized the decisions of the politicians when they bought these vaccines, and they thought the models you were using were wrong, and your predictions were wrong. And even though now, in the first step of this crisis, people thought that all the steps to mitigate the coronavirus were going to be a waste of money, because their first false positive in 2005-06 was terrible. And this is because the models were not trustable by that time. And that's why I think we have to provide the trust and confidence on our models. It's essential. Because
absolutely. I totally agree. Trust will certainly be the thing that will enable you to adopt and embrace change. You won't redefine yourself if you're not trusting that that's a clever thing to do.
But I think there's so many ways now, if you're really paying attention what is happening in your company when the crisis hit. I'll give a couple of examples. All of a sudden now, you start realizing that I need another type of analysis. All of a sudden now, everything is uncertain. So this monthly report or monthly analysis is not enough anymore. I need to have something daily. So all of a sudden, you get this, I've heard the terminology, the golden arrow. Someone on the top level, really CEO of a company, he basically highlights, now what, we need to have this data now. So all of a sudden now, we have the CEO of a company truly caring about data and asking the right questions. And all of a sudden, stuff can start to happen. Now, there's a couple of things that happens now. First of all, we scramble the team. We start understanding cross-functional. Second, what happens is actually you realize what you have that is good and where you have cheated. I'll give you an example. We have this report. Great. I love this report that I have in PowerPoint or in Power BI every month. I want it daily. You ask for it daily and everybody stops squirming because behind the report, there is no data infrastructure. There's no data pipelines. We have done it in a way that was good enough for the monthly report, but it was not truly data driven. So if you pay attention now, you start learning about, okay, where is our weaknesses in our system? How much do we need to care about the fundamental data quality or the whole data pipe, the infrastructure as such that can provide this in real time, like the foundation to do AI, so to speak. And ultimately, what's the balance? How many BI guys do I need to have towards the analytical AI guy, towards the data pipeline guys? So all of a sudden, you can start thinking about why do I have all these visualization guys, but no scientists? Or why do I have 10 scientists, but no data pipeline guys? So if you pay attention now, you will learn so much about your strengths and weaknesses in your setup, and even in your balancing, and even in your steering and organization. I think this is a huge opportunity for any company that pays attention right now.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Just to take the discussion further, this is exactly basically where we wanted to be in the middle of the discussion, so to say. So we went from the defining that this is a black swan scenario. We went through the macro scenarios, or how this is affecting basically on a macro level. We went into the micro levels as well, how it's affecting the enterprises. We discussed about the positive outputs that we can actually learn from this. So now the next question is actually about when we know that there are some very positive gains to take out of this as well. So how can we help this organization right now to utilize this time to accelerate instead of brake? So what is happening is that most of the organization, they are crippled, they are in panic, they are in full stop. Henrik was talking about showing what things didn't work. How many analysts do you need? How many BI guys do you need? How many data architecture or engineers do you need? So what is your recommendation at this point of time? Because I think that everybody is right now looking for positive feedback of how they can collaborate, start working, create some very, very fast ROI scalable projects that actually can take the enterprises out of this ditch. Because we are talking about global scale economic downturn. Right? There is no time to think about your local stores. You need to be online, not in 4 months. You need to be online in 3 weeks or 1 week or 2 weeks. It doesn't matter, right? How can we do it? What can they do?
Well, so I think one thing that the companies can do, and that they are doing, if they're bold and brave, and some companies are, I think they can radically reassess the current market. So, and a great example for me is what Scania did in regards to Getinge. Right? So all of a sudden Scania sends people to Getinge to help out in their factory there, because Getinge needs to create more of these respiratory pieces of equipment, right? So they're understaffed all of a sudden. And Scania, hey, we have a bunch of people that can't create or manufacture trucks anymore. So, let's redistribute the resources. Or the way Scandinavian Airlines are educating some of the stewardess and stewards to be nurses and help out in healthcare. So you can completely rethink where the business opportunity is in the marketplace, and see, okay, beyond the very domain specific thing that we thought our company is doing or is all about, what are we really about, really? And
but Patrick, this is really good. The redistribution of resources according to prioritize. I think this is the number one topic that I would stress, because you can do that in between companies. But think about the big companies that you have your silos, and it's very easy now. We need to do, we're not going to work full time, or this project is not working anymore, so we need to let them go. No, you need to think carefully about how do we redistribute resources across the company where it makes most sense, or to other companies. And I think it's easy to say, but it's very fantastic when you see it happening, as the examples you explained. But I think in every company right now, there are things that are that is not so vital to do, and more things how you can redistribute. And it could be that the sales guy can't sell, but we can do other things in order to support, I don't know, credit. So redistribution of resources within the company and within society, and to make that happen, I think that's a very good first advice, Patrick.
Let me point out there, sir. In the companies, we haven't mentioned yet, but I think one of the main points of the corona effect for the industries is that now they have to reformulate Industry 4.0, because Industry 4.0, we have been putting sensors in the machines, we have been doing many processes with AI, robotic, etc. But now we have found in our factories, in our supply chain, that the fragile part is the human. Then now we need to have more robots performing production, performing maintenance. more automated process. We need to make our factories with the concept of the dark factory, no humans there. And why I'm saying this? Because if we can have dark factories with the people working from home and watching the process remotely, if we can have autonomous vehicles, if we can remove the human from some aspects that are critical to break the supply chain, is critical in this kind of crisis. And we have realized that the human is a very fragile part of our world. Then we have the technology like autonomous vehicles, like robotics, like AI, to make our critical process fully automated in such a way that for example, the mines, they don't stop and they are extracting oil because the robots are there. The oil and gas industry, the refineries, I can tell you that I know refineries that they are working with very, very few people because they are fully automated, and so on. Then if we have fully automated industry and transport and services, we will be able to have a quite comfortable society. And I think Industry 4.0 has to be reformulated in this way after this corona crisis.
So just to add to that, there are some areas of our society and industry where we can fully automate some tasks, but there are also a large part where we can't today, at least, fully automate it. And some areas we need to basically combine humans with AI. And
Yes.
one of the kind of obvious problems today is that we're severely lacking data scientists, especially with domain expertise knowledge. So how do we solve that?
Yes.
How does companies even know what to do? Or what's even possible to do?
Yeah, and that's a very good...
And one other thing we are working with in the Swedish AI agenda is to come up with what we call a use case factory. Basically a set of good examples how companies have used AI for real use cases and what the mistakes and the best practices was to make this successful. If we can have companies have a catalog of these good use cases, that can inspire a lot of other companies to what they also can do. And this is at least one way to solve the severe lack of data science combined with the main expertise lack of knowledge.
Yeah, I think that's a great initiative, and that's precisely right. And I think, to your point, reskilling and skilling is certainly something that we need to address. And I think what companies also need to do is not just reallocate resources, but they have to realize that, there will be a tomorrow. There will be life after Corona. There will be a different market after this current market. And they need to look at that and try to understand what will that look like? And how do we make ourselves relevant in that marketplace? So now it's like a steel bath, or this is a purgatory fire that a lot of companies won't survive, but the ones that will survive will do these things. They will reallocate resources in the short term, and they will invest in their belief in a future that they think they have a slight grasp on, because they have crunched the numbers and are looking out on okay, what is needed. And as you say, if that then means that we need to start skilling data scientists, well, let's go do that then. And I think the WASP program is a great effort in that regards, and I think there can be many, many more. And I certainly think that it's of course super important to just crisis mitigate and look at the here and now and just put out the fires and save people's lives. But it's also important to be confident that we will ride this out, although it will be a different future we will move into, and then just try to figure out how to position yourself in that future. So I think there is a lot of reflection required now on behalf of companies, because the notions of business as usual should probably be put off the agenda.
I have another angle, and I'm not sure it's correct, but I'm really thinking about it. So when you have this crisis and you really now get some sort of, you sober up to some new priorities, and you're really rethinking your priorities. I wonder if even that to some degree shows us that we are maybe spreading ourselves too thin on doing too many different initiatives or small pilots everywhere, And now when you have a crisis and you really focus and do the real investment and work something properly into the ground, because now it's the bare essentials we're talking about, maybe that's also a healthy thing, that instead of trying too many different things, really understand what are the most essential things to do and do those really, really well. So if we have the data, so maybe even in the future now, maybe this is the crisis, put the light on the real stuff, and maybe it's a little bit like shutting up all the taps, and then really understanding now when I put them back on again, which one should I put back on and which one should I really put back on, so I basically have different types of focus my investments moving forward, even on the other side of the crisis.
Yeah, it's
recalibration.
It's like having an iPhone, and you download all of these apps.
Exactly.
But you don't use most of them. So at this point of time, when you don't have anything to do, you sit and it's time to clean my telephone. It's like,
but one thing is following your reasoning, Henrik. One thing that the companies in general are very bad in is with the risk assessment, and this is something that we have to consider. It's if you go to the banking or the financial business, the risk analysis the banks do are fantastic. They consider all uncertainty when they do some kind of investment. They consider in the Gaussian curve, okay, my benefit is here, but if my benefit go to the corner cases or tails of the distribution, then still I have margin for benefit, etc. In the companies in general, the uncertainty, the risk is very bad assessed. And this is something that we need risk managers that when the decisions are taken with the data are able to evaluate the decision, but also the uncertainty of the decision and the uncertainty with all possible consequences and mitigation actions. And if we act like the banking or the military people or some other sectors that are very conservative, then I think we have to be more protective. And the data-driven models, as Patrick said, are very powerful to have a risk mitigation in all our business. Then we can be more bulletproof against some contingencies, and when we do a proper risk analysis.
We can wrap up for now, and as a summary, I would like I was taking some notes while everybody was speaking. So basically, until now, we have come to the point where we are talking about how can organization accelerate instead of breaking. So far we have this is the bullet points of the key takeaways. Okay. So we have defined actually that. We have defined that this is a black swan scenario. Okay, it forces us to focus on what it counts. We need to focus on what it counts. We need to focus on a hyper transformation of society and enterprises. We need a hybrid approach to AI, but we are not equipped for this right now because we need to align domain expertise with technical AI. What this crisis is forcing us to do is basically to have all hands on deck and cut through the bureaucracies, the processes, and focus on what the business needs today. We need to trust the skills. We need to trust the people. We need to trust and have a confidence in the AI models as well. We need to get the job done no matter what are the requirements. We can do this by working from home. We can do this by working in our enterprises. Stay safe, everybody. The important thing, there is no boundary. So organization, neither the startups and enterprises or public sector or private sector or private persons, all can be a part of it. Because the beautiful thing about this right now is that nobody cares about where the solution is coming from as long as the solution is there. Right. And finally, we discussed basically on what to do right now, because what we cannot afford to do is to stop learning, stop advancing, stop innovating. So there were some very fine-tuned topics here. For example, we need to reassess the current markets that we are. We need to reassess and reflect on our businesses, probably actually start doing red ocean strategy on most of the projects that we have in place. This is both for a business part in an operational level, tactical level when it comes to data and AI innovation. Maybe you don't need so many BI people, maybe you need more data scientists, maybe you need more data engineers. You need to find these low-hanging fruits that Anders was talking about and try to make an impact right now. We also need to redistribute the resources. So if you have some people that are actually good in one point of time, but you need them at this point of time at somewhere else, redistribute them. We can take people from the hotels and the event industry, which basically were affected first, and bridge the gap of the 77,000 IT people that in Sweden we need by 2024, right? Start educating people. That is what it is. We also need to reformulate digitalization, as Diego was talking about, because at this Industry 4.0, when we are talking about mass digitalization, robotics, AI, where is it right now? We need to go to the dark factories, build more robots, and allow people to actually monitor this from home, and we need to break the supply chain. And finally, we need to basically create catalog of use cases, which I think is super, super important. Imagine if IBM with Peltarion, with Scania, with Grundfos, and everybody else start bringing these use cases into one playbook. Okay, in Dairdux, they're calling it airplane playbooks, right? Then we can accelerate this data and
I love it.
as very, very quickly as possible. And finally, don't forget about risk assessment. We have been blinded. We have been having so good life that we basically forgot about creating risk assessment for every single thing that we do in our organization. So with this, I think that we should stop at this point of time. And for the next time, we can discuss hardcore data and AI initiatives that you can take right now to get out of this Corona output. Is this a good summary? I think it is.
Good summary. Good.
Yeah.
Great.
Very good.
Perfect. So thank you very much for today, and have a great dinner. Yeah. Stay safe.
You too, guys.
Have a
Stay
great
safe.
day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good fun.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.